Hello everybody, it's Friday night and that means it's time for the Weekender once again as we take a deep dive into the tabletop gaming and hobby news that's caught our eye throughout the past 7 days. Take a look at some World War II games, both miniature and card, alongside some comic book cauldron fun with Slaine from Warlord games and a host of other bits and pieces to keep you tantalized and on the edge of your seats. On top of all of that, courtesy of the UK Games Expo, we also have a copy of Fantasy Flight Games' Marvel Champions card game to give away. One lucky subscriber will be taking that home. If you comment below and if you can share us around, you may be in with a chance to win that. Otherwise, sit back, relax, because your weekend starts here. Hello everybody and welcome to another fun-filled weekend, packed full of all the usual gaming goodness and miniature mayhem that you've come to know and love. Before we get stuck into the show proper, a couple of little teeny-tiny updates, tiny ones. Well, actually, two massive ones, but you know, there you go. Obviously, we're only 2 weeks away now.
Like that, yeah.
From UK close. Games Expo.
Start of June, coming around.
So if you do fancy coming along and seeing us there and buying me drink, then you're more than welcome. I'm very, very easily bribed, but you need to pick up your tickets, I think, fairly sharpish. So there's tickets available for family or individual tickets for the whole weekend or individual days, depending on what you fancy going to. And if you can't make it, which would be a terrible shame, but if you can't, you'll still be able to follow along at home, because we'll be doing live streams throughout the weekend and the usual interviews and reviews with anybody we can lay our hands on.
Stuff, yeah.
We will hunt them down and winkle out of them
things.
all of their information. So if there's anything in particular that you want to see or anybody you know is going to be,
definitely let us know.
Let us know. Yeah, especially if it's something more esoteric or unusual that we might not think about. So
we'll send free to go hunt it down.
If you've heard of a weird board game or card game that's Lord of the Rings adjacent, then yeah, I'm pretty certain free will know about that already. But other things beyond that, let us know. And otherwise, we will see you in 2 weeks at that. Other big piece of news is Nova and their charitable foundation. Obviously, with everything that's been happening of late, we've got a very widespread community who are also a charitable bunch when you get right down to it. And Cromlech contacted Nova to see if there was any way that they could help out or raise some money. So they've put together a charity raffle in conjunction with Nova, where the proceeds are all going to various charities that are helping out in Ukraine. And there's a whole host of stuff available in there, from dioramas to individual to large models,
like one you might recognize.
And they've literally dragged through named and famous people from across the industry to do stuff for them, including, and this is one of my favorite bits here, a bit of Paul Bonner original artwork. You know, that doesn't come along.
I think it's pretty amazing.
So the raffle started this week, and it runs until the 16th of June, I want to say. It's like a month.
Something like that.
So if you're interested in picking up any of these stunning pieces of work, then you can chuck a few dollars towards Nova and help out a very worthy cause.
Yeah, so you'll go onto each of the individual items. It'll have a rundown of the information that pertains to them, and then there'll be a sort of add to cart button, and that'll get you the ticket for that particular miniature so that you might get drawn to win that. And of course, you're giving money to good causes, which is the main thing of this anyway as well. But you get a nice miniature out of it as well, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, if you're the winner.
So if you're the winner,
I'd look at that. I mean, that's really nicely painted, but mine's much bigger. I just have to do this. They have done videos for all of the miniatures as well, by the way.
Comes with a smoke machine in that one. That's why it's called Smoky. So
it really does. Smoke and light. Yeah. The other white mate, look at its belly cannon go. I mean, it may not be the best painted that you can win out there, but it's got a whole thing all of its own. I will point out that they've put the arms on back to front from how I painted it. But then those are modular, so you can swap them around either way. Yeah. But yeah, so look at me. I'm famous. It says so below in the text. It says internationally famous me. Nobody was more surprised than I was, because I'm fairly certain I wasn't internationally famous, but there you go. Very big in Scandinavia.
Hey, I bigged you up in the blurb that we sent over.
Is that what it was? So you wrote, that makes sense then. Yeah. He's not one of the best, but he's tall. Have we mentioned how tall he is? There's a tremendous sense of value.
Makes a great difference.
Yeah. So if you want a chance to win what is potentially a monumental Orky prize, the raffle ticket for that's $10. And there were also KRs doing a custom fit case for it as well. So, yeah, all bells, all whistles, and a great cause with a whole host of spectacular painters have got involved, and me. So, there's a lot to see there. I really like that. Yeah. The comic book style Hulk.
Yeah, the genuinely good cause, obviously, and it's just a nice way to, throw a couple of bucks towards charity and also be, in with the potential of winning something fun at the same time as well. So. And as you say, we're a charitable bunch at heart. Yeah. And as Woodward said at the beginning to the original Battleground series, gamers are always really nice chaps. So
that is good old Edward Woodward.
So, yeah.
Or Ewa Woodward, if you take all the D's out. There we have it. So yeah, you've got a month essentially if you want to donate to good cause and be with a chance to win some spanking miniatures as well. Then you should check out Nova. The links are on our little doobly-doo below anyway, so you can see it from there. But to get the show kicked off properly, it's the most important part of the week and of the show. It's time for the Indie of the Week. This week, people's eardrums have not been blasted. Well done, us. And this one is a French sculptor. He's worked for a variety of companies over the years, doing like Wreck Edge and Relic miniatures and stuff like that. Very sort of heavily influenced by everybody's favorite French company, Rackham. But he went from painting miniatures to deciding to give sculpting a chance, and then eventually set up his own little company, Aenor, or Aenor? Depends how you want to pronounce that. And it's not a massive range, but there's some excellent bits and pieces in here, and he generally runs dual casting, so metal and resin, because people are fickle. We know this. People are very fickle. So they don't always like the resin. Well, that's fine. You can get the metal or vice versa. But the quality of his sculpts is absolutely amazing. We see here, stuff. Look, another week, another barbarian with their nipples out. Good times.
You can't escape them.
No, you really can't. I'm going to butcher his name because French, and therefore you cover half of the letters and only pronounce what vowels you can see. But I think it's like Sylvain Quiron is the sculptor's name. So he hasn't been doing it for particularly long, like 10 years. But I absolutely adore his sculpting style, and it just screams. It screams Rackham to me so much.
It really does, yeah.
Especially whenever you see some of the other things like this. The Wandering Priest. I mean, he could have stepped from Cadwallon, which I'm just
definitely got that vibe going on. That's for sure.
Yeah, him creeping through the streets, looking for people to butcher. I mean, heal. He's a nice bishop.
Of course,
he is. But there's just so much character in the sculpts as well.
Yeah. Let's go back to let me see if I can pick out some. The barbarian warrior there on the right looks pretty cool.
This one?
That one there, yeah. And the witch and the cat is also pretty awesome. I like the look of that one.
This one or the trainee?
The one below.
The trainee.
Yeah. Which? Oh, I can't remember which way. Where do the names go for the?
I have a sneaking suspicion that Google Translate is helped by moving things.
Okay, right, yeah.
But we'll have a look at the Witch and the Cat.
Yeah.
That's an interesting,
so nice and
interesting staff.
Yeah. It's like a hand sort of reaching up, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
It's Miniac's logo.
Yes. That's really nice stuff. I like the sculpting of the proportions of the characters. It's slightly more realistic, which I think is quite nice. But then you've got this. It's more realistic on some characters, but then in other cases, it's like they've blown out particular elements of the model to make them to emphasize them, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, like the barbarian has the heroic musculature.
Yeah,
but the witch here has like that very slender, I don't eat a lot human look.
Yeah. So you got like a very sort of like normal style head, and then like proper full on Popeye style.
Yeah,
which is really cool. Yeah.
He didn't skip leg day anyway.
No.
And then again, I mean, because this will just be for people who remember some of Rackham stuff, but he just screams like he should be one of the Droon. Especially with that axe.
Yeah.
And again, I'm 100% on board with that choice stylistically.
And these are all hand sculpted as well, aren't they? Rather than CAD or anything. So
he's a sculptor of the old school, shall we say? Sitting home with green stuff and bees putty. In fact, you can buy bees putty on his website. If you do plan on getting into any actual sculpting yourself.
Okay, so there you can see the variation between the resin and the metal versions then as well. That's cool. You've got a nice set of models that could be used as sort of like your adventuring party, or if you're going to be playing Frostgrave or something, you could use these to sort of step in as characters and things. It's quite nice.
Yeah. Thief, barbarian, wizards, priests, and even a bard at the back with a harp, I think.
Yeah.
The worst type of character, the bard.
Depending on how you paint some of those as well, you could use them for Forbidden Psalms as well. So the Merkburg sort of twist on skirmish games, especially that guy.
The old hermit.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I actually made I think I showed you my Merkburg miniatures. I made a Jerry in there. Yeah. I don't know why the old hermit made me think of that. But,
I'm curious to I'm going to ask you too. Would you prefer the resin or the metal?
Ooh.
And why?
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think it depends how many parts they come in. If they're like 1 or 2 part, then metal. If they're more than that, then the resin, I think. Also, I find metal easier to clean for the most part with just a knife, I think, because there's the brittleness sometimes of resin that you've got to worry about occasionally.
Yeah.
So I think I'd prefer metal if it came in like 1 or 2 parts. But if it's much more than that, then probably resin, I think. Just for the sake, the ease of gluing it all together. So
I'm honestly, I could go either way, to be brutally honest. I really like, I will often pick resin stuff up if I think I'm just going to have it to own it and paint it, because the crispness of the casting is generally right up there. Metal casting is excellent. You've got that heft to it as well. But sometimes you'll lose a little bit of the detail, although never a huge amount. But you'll always see slightly more in a good resin cast than you will in a metal sculpt. I do like the heft. I also like the fact he's using a sword as a punch dagger, belted onto his vambrace there.
That's really cool.
I dread to think what happened to the poor fellow who got hit.
These would be really great for a game we're going to talk about in the news. The Yafsiga, actually. I think the aesthetic of these looks really good. There you go. There's a teaser for what's to come. But yeah. Those are amazing. I love those.
This was his most recent. He does little Kickstarters to fund the casting side of it. So occasionally he'll pop up with something. Yeah. And you're just going, oh, that's excellent. I can't wait to see. So you can sort of see a development over time. with the fantasy stuff.
Yeah.
The ogres. I mean, the ogre set is one of my favorites. He's done the orcs as well. We'll see the orcs in a minute.
Wow.
He's got a pig.
What about you, John? Are you a resin or a metal person?
I sort of lean with you, Ben. Like if there's a lot of parts, I would have said resin would be the way to go. I'm also, because I'm more a painter, I look more quickly to a resin model because I know if I drop a metal model, I'm going to have to repaint the part that chips because it's going to chip. Where there's kind of a less of a chance of a resin. Well, a resin won't bend. A resin will snap, and when resin snaps, it's a cleaner break to fix. So there shouldn't really be any repainting around that if you've washed and prepped the model. So yeah, generally I would lean to a resin more than metal, mainly because I don't want to have to repaint anything if it chips. That's it, really.
I love that guy's got bottles stuffed in his pants.
Stuffed in his pants. You know.
The fact that his butt will keep them in places. And just the detail in that beard is amazing. Oh, wow. I love the idea of using that as kind of like an alternative encounter model in like a skirmish game or a role-playing game, where normally when you're facing off against like an ogre or something, you'd be like, oh, it's automatically an enemy, you need to kill him. Whereas this guy's like, no, this guy just lives in the woods. Just leave him alone.
All he wants to do is harvest enough lumber for the local village to keep him supplied in whiskey and beer throughout the winter.
And why send 3 men to cut down a tree when an ogre can do it in one hit? So, these are amazing as well. These more ogre warriors? Yeah,
it's more ogre warriors. Because sometimes you need more ogre warriors.
The amount of character in each sculpt is just great. It's not something you get out of a multi-part plastic kit, that's for sure.
Yeah. The other thing as well that I always like about these is that the more detail you throw into these, the easier they are to paint in many regards, because they do the thing that Warren's always said, where like as long as you get the base colors down and then you just apply a good wash, most of the time it will work and it'll pick out all the nooks and crannies in the model and it'll look amazing with very little effort needed, which I think is really cool. So
whereas some people would be tempted to overpaint it. I think, and I agree with Warren, you just get the base colors down and then get your detail with your washes and highlighting, and you're done.
It's a different take on an orc.
I am a sucker for a cloak. A good cloak is something that sells a model for me as well, because it means that when you're painting the back of the model, you don't actually have to do that much. You just do the cloak and focus on the front.
Especially if it's a nice cloak with a big symbol embossed on the back.
An orc patrol, you say, sir?
Really nice, like spindly orcs as well, which is really nice. The way that I approach those as well is that you could almost go down the route of not necessarily painting them in that kind of traditional green. You could go for like either like a muted earthy tone or maybe something like a red or a blue. I think would work quite nicely with those because they have almost like a little bit of a devilish quality to them as well, which is quite cool.
You could lean into the realism a bit more and go down the line of the Lord of the Rings orcs.
Corrupted elves. You don't make them all green skinned. You just make them sort of
model, like because a lot of them have modelly, weird colored, very pale and stuff.
Like he's rescuing an animal from that farm that's just spontaneously combusted and all the residents died. Good guy, orc.
Those are really cool.
But you said he had a small range, but I mean this is pretty broad.
Oh yeah,
like if he's not been at it long.
It's getting there. We'll put it like that. It's getting there. There's a couple more orc characters. See things like that.
I think because we've had so much of like an influx. I mean, it's always been there, but we've had a much more of an influx. I think of skirmish games recently over the last couple of years, where you tend to then not necessarily collect an army, but have like a handful of models be the center of your attention. And having like slightly more bespoke ranges like this, pick these up immediately. You've got a use for them in games. Whereas before you might have seen these as effectively just display pieces, as you were talking about earlier. Now these could actually have a use on the gaming table. And, the fact that they've done this as, a warband, a raiding party, makes them immediately usable as well, which is always handy. So
Yeah, you
and there's no shortage of skirmish games for you to play with.
Yeah, you don't need to worry about having units of 20 or 30 or 40.
Yeah.
You know, having half a dozen models is enough to make an interesting bulk of your force, and then you can just add in some leaders and a few archery types.
Mm-hmm.
The rise of so many miniature agnostic game systems
Yes.
as well is a big encouragement to this sort of thing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You might be seeing a resurgence of the small sculptor getting a lot more exposure than they used to.
Definitely, I think so. The thing that's quite nice, I think, nowadays as well, is that I think a lot more people are looking towards these more hand sculpted models.
Yeah.
And then they get picked up by larger companies. I say larger companies, but like Boris does a lot of obviously he does hand sculpted stuff, and then Westphalia then sort of sends those out to people. So there are avenues for people who create these smaller ranges to get them out there. And I mean, obviously, Silver's doing a fantastic job here with these, but just on themselves. But this is why we do Indie of the Week, so that people will see these amazing miniatures. And
I think it would be nice for it, like, because Jerry and I have been talking about one-page rules a lot in the past, in the recent time with the Raging Heroes project. And I would love to see stuff like, one-page rules does a recommended, a miniatures agnostic rule set gives you miniature companies that they like the style of that their style fits with would be cool.
Yeah.
Give you an idea, because if you're shopping for stuff, you're not necessarily going to know unless you watch every Indie of the Week where some of these companies are and where some of these miniatures are.
Yeah.
So a cool recommended list or for each game system would be kind of fun.
I saw that with there was a Viking inspired sort of heavy metal game that came out. Ragnarok that came out a couple of years ago, and that in there they had a thing at the back of the book where it's like, these are all the miniatures we've used for this. You don't have to use these, but these are like the ones that we think fit our aesthetic. I think that's a key thing you're saying, John. Like this is the aesthetic of our game. If you want things that match it, go and check out these kind of things. So
yeah,
well, they used to do that. I mean, depending on the company, you'll sometimes get that. Weirdly, Warhammer Ancient Battles, when Games Workshop allowed them to do that, the back of the book was just, here's all the miniatures we use and the companies we got them from. And I've got a few World War II rule sets that are the same, going, here's the places where I got my bits and pieces from. It's a really nice troll. Boom.
Yeah. I love that you've got the slightly more standard look and feel of a troll, and then you've got where they've gone off in different directions with them as well. So they've really taken the ability to be like, let's just try and work out exactly how to make each troll feel unique and different. So,
but keeping
give a troll a builder's butt
aesthetic. Yeah. They've all got the Bradford smile. Oh, he's got different floppy ears. Hello. That's more GW Stone Troll look.
Like an old school Stone Troll, yeah. But with a more classic face, which I think is quite nice. Wow.
The half giant.
Yeah.
Let's
not think about what he halved with. That's
yeah. We weren't, but then you brought it up. Can you mind out the giant gutter?
Yeah.
Be a beautiful looking monsters, certainly, and then you've got things like this.
Goblin.
The actual little goblin collection.
Wow.
Indeed. And again, not the usual take on them.
Yeah, there's some kind of more dog face style looking ones in there as well, which is quite nice. A bit sort of labyrinthy and stuff.
Oh yeah, very Brian Froud.
Yeah.
These are brilliant.
Yeah, I know.
And I didn't even know these exist as well. So
look at the knight with his little antlers on him.
The Green Knight.
Oh dear. Say nothing. That is a beautiful wizard.
It really is.
He's got a book of spells from somewhere. Creepy fellow.
I don't know how these work.
Well, maybe it's the sort of classic, the goblins are the clever ones, and the orcs the orcs are just there as muscle, doing what they're told.
I do like that idea of like this being the people that actually rule the kingdom, and the orc raiding parties is out because they are just the big dumb brutes.
It's very druidic with the sickle.
It is, yeah.
And a horned rat skull as a hat. Goblins.
Yeah, because there's your town guard.
See, makes sense.
Yeah.
Why do all the heavy lifting when you've got idiots to do it for you? Well, there's an idiot. No idiot. Why are you dragging a bell? Where are you going with that?
We need to know where you are at every turn, Globrot.
Well, all I can think now is they've got a horned rat skull and he's got a bell. Have they just killed up a bunch of Skaven?
Yeah.
Just looting all their stuff. Yeah. But even then, within the range, there's exceptions. He's got more sort of gummy bears goblin.
He does, yeah.
With the really...
He looks so spindly and gaunt as well. Got like that Gollum energy going on.
He's a happy man with a cleaver.
What's quite nice about this then, it kind of shows like that all goblins don't need to be the same kind of thing. Like we're normally, I mean, I guess we're used to just mass battle where all the goblins just look like the same goblin wearing different clothes.
Yes.
Whereas this is like they're as varied in their look, build,
and stature,
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got everyone from sort of tall, spindly to short and fat.
Some goblins do eat all the pies.
And all points in between.
Yeah.
He wishes he was big enough to get to the pie before the pie got taken away.
I've always wanted to roleplay a goblin thief in D&D.
Uh-huh.
And I always thought about getting is it the sneaks from Mantic for that?
Yeah.
But I think these look amazing.
Oh,
I have to go with one of these. Yeah.
And I also like clearly there's things like a night goblin-esque aesthetic with the tall hat there and the bone through it.
Yeah.
So you can see influences coming from Rackham and coming from GW and coming from, I think that's Friar Tuck. So, there's just this melding of what Sylvan's take on a goblin is. And it's generic, but at the same time, it feels like it lives somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not generic to the point of nondescriptness. I mean, again, there's a weird, wacky, tall, spindly goblin, and a long face on him.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that kind of thing. Look, he's got a bone. Ha. But it's got that feel of, as you say, like generic, but has a place. So you could use it in pretty much any fantasy world. But then it all feels like they knit together quite nicely. So when you build your warband, they feel like a coherent mass rather than just sort of like, I found some goblins online. That's a really cool collection. Really good.
There are
relatively cheap as well, actually.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, resin's more expensive. Resin's more expensive than the metals. So if I find the metal version of the warband, you're saving yourself about 30 quid.
Yeah.
So,
and each individual figures are like €5, so like 4 or 5 quid as well. So yeah,
very small blacksmith
with a very big hammer.
Horror is relatively small. Mm-hmm. Just a couple of sort of modern day horror-y type things with some wombies.
Use those for Black Sight's game that I've forgotten the name of.
I'm with you.
Don't look back. Don't look back. That's it, yeah.
Good for Don't Look Back. Good for Studio Miniatures have a zombie game as well, yeah. Or just,
Crooked Dice, or just to have.
Just to have. Everybody just wants some random zombies. He looks wrong. He's not right. We even have a butcher. Is this some survivors? Is this the little collection in Toto? Oh, it is. I mean, the businessman with the hockey stick.
Barney Stinson with a hockey stick.
You're thinking Barney Stinson, yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's adjusting the tie.
Challenge accepted.
Barney, what is your role in the zombie apocalypse? Please. And then the last one are the aliens, which is a terrible shame that Ludd isn't here.
Oh, they're greys.
They are greys.
Oh my god.
Those are amazing.
Space Pirate. With his
my
cutlass and
God.
space laser.
That's great.
Flintlock space laser. Wow.
Ta-da.
Oh, he's living his best life.
He really is.
Universal genius.
Brilliant. I bet there's a board game somewhere that could really use these, I reckon. Yeah. Or just some crooked dice or something.
Yeah, crooked dice is probably the way to go.
Yeah.
Because remember, I want to say it was Kill All Humans or Destroy All Humans?
Destroy All Humans, yeah.
Surely at some point somebody should have made a board game adaptation of that. Dum, 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 ba, 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 ba.
Oh, cool. They got the priest as well. So you can do both sides.
Oh, yeah. Kalima.
That needs to be painted as a crystal skull, though, surely.
No.
So.
What are you talking about? What movie was that? I don't know.
I forgot that. I thought that was never made. Yeah.
No. I don't even know where he's... Crystal Skull? What?
I heard there was a movie with Shia LaBeouf in it that didn't turn out so well. So.
Kalima. I mean, why would you not have greys in that sort of look? It's like little Cthulhu statues as well.
Very cool. What an awesome little range that is. Yeah.
Yep. And I mean, why not just go ahead and just dump 40 quid on it? Get the lot. See if there's any messing around.
That'll be on Lloyd's wish list. So, yeah.
That pirate is just great.
Really is.
I love tiny Cthulhu.
Yeah.
Idol, because that's always good. It's always
a great pick, Jerry. That's really cool.
Yeah. Thank you. And also, if you fancy sculpting, there is Bee's Putty.
By your own.
Yeah. For those of you at home thinking about getting involved in sculpting, the interesting thing about Bee's Putty is it doesn't cure like green stuff. It has to be baked. It's like a sculpey type thing, so you can do a lot of fine detail, get it right, and then stick it in the oven, and then layer stuff on top of it. Just throwing it out there if you want to. He has a blog, by the way, if people are interested in seeing more of Sylvan's work from going way back in time and up to...
I'll link that down below as well.
Yeah, it's Area 51 Minis. But we'll
makes sense with all the greys.
Yeah, well, that's where it started. And you can tell that, I mean, they're very generic grey aliens, so very easy to sculpt because it's just big eyes, big head, 3 fingers, and then, but if you contrast that with 10 years later, goblins, trolls, and ogres, you're going, we see the development here. But yeah, there you go. So that's Aenor Miniatures. Let us know what you think below, folks. We're going to take a quick swish, and when we come back, we'll be looking at the news.
Coming to you from the center of Northwestern Europe. Covering board games, war games, card games, and all that you love. It's the news.
Okay, so we're back with the news, and where are we kicking off this week, Ben?
So we're kicking off with a little bit of historical goodness. I know pretty much nothing about this. I basically just copy what Flames of War put on their website. So, Battlefront on their website. So, John, if you could take us through what we're seeing here for the new Bulge German pre-orders, that would be cool. And no one will shout at me. So there we go.
So, the Bulge book has been a book that's been delayed for quite a while, and now we're finally getting it because we got the Bulge American book last year, which brought us so much interesting stuff. A lot of the late war toys come into play, particularly with the Americans getting some really cool stuff like Pershings and whatnot. In this one, with the German book, we're getting a whole range of new armor and infantry for your tabletop. Particularly, we're finally seeing the big cats, the really big cats coming out in plastic. We're getting a King Tiger kit. We're getting a Yag Tiger kit, which are all in plastic. We've got new stuff for artillery and small tank destroyers like the Hummel and the Hornies are coming in plastic. We've got some Panzer Grenadiers coming as well with 251 half tracks in the starter box, as well as eventually, I'm not sure it's in this release cycle or not, but there is new plastic half tracks coming as well, cool. Which have new weapon options, new layouts, that sort of thing. This box here the Heavy Tank Hunter Kampfgruppe. I have already unboxed. I don't know when it's coming out, but I have had it in my hands. And the only real thing that's new in this box, plastic kit wise, is the Hornies and the Hummels at the back there. These kits are really nicely engineered, really easy to put together. If you're a bit clever with your magnetization, you're going to get both variants if you're just a little clever with how you put the kits together. I also say this in the unboxing with the Jagdpanther, because the Jagdpanther is a 2-sprue kit that has enough parts to do Panther G as well as Jagdpanther. Again, if you're clever with your build, you can get both vehicles out of that. So what I wanted to stress in the unboxing for this box set was the versatility of the kits, because you're able to change things out, like the Ostwinds that are on the box cover. You can build them as verbal winds with the quad 20mm as well. Those turrets are completely self-contained parts, and they go together really well. So you have your Jagdpanther box as well here. Again, like I said, if you're clever, you can make it as 5 of one or 5 of the other.
It's lower track and lower hull and lower hull and tracks.
Lower hull, tracks, backplate, and exhausts are universal across both vehicles, and then you have enough parts across the 2 sprues that can combine the kit to make both variants, so you do get plenty out of the kit.
Very cool. Yeah.
I don't know if I need any more.
I think you want the Hummel Hornies kit.
I do, because I currently only have grills as my artillery.
Yeah, and again, another very good kit. They've engineered it in such a way that it's easy to put together and easy to work with. I'm thinking, I'm not sure if I want to put one of the new King Tigers under the painting table, or if I want to put one of these under the painting table. I'm sat with options, so I have plenty of options.
Always good.
King Tigers in plastic, finally. It's about time, because we've had plastic Tiger ones for ages. We've had plastic Panthers for ages. Now we're getting these in plastic as well, and it's just great. Like, it's not the same as the likes of the Jagdpanther. You can't make a Jagdtiger with this box. It's just the kits are individual sets.
Do they have the 2 turret types, or is it specifically done for the?
It's just that. Yeah. It's just that turret. Honestly, I would have kind of liked them to have done the earlier. The initial production turret as well, but this is the one that was built the most of. This is the one that you see most of in the archive footage and the photographs. So it only makes sense to do this as the main run plastic. But in general, I'm happy with it, because it's bringing the late war back into the fore for Flames of War. That's where all the big toys are. As much as a lot of people are saying, early war is the most balanced because every force is kind of on the same level. Mid war is where you start to see the change a little bit, and late war is where the Germans become low numbers but highly effective, whereas the Allies become high numbers and fairly effective, or more effective. I've always enjoyed late war. I think a lot of people do as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next.
Did you get
sorry, go on.
I was going to say, did you get the Bulge book to have a look at, or has it just been the miniature so far?
I have the book, but I haven't properly had to go through it yet. Usually that's reserved for me and Chris, but Chris is very hard to pin down at the minute. So
terrible.
Yeah, we're working on that.
Something in the book, they said they've redone a scenario. I'm going to say, is his name Piper's Charge? Piper's Charge. Yeah. And I was looking at it, and I found an old PDF of it, and it looks pretty cool. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, can you give like a spark notes of that? Because it seems like a fun scenario that they've put in there.
From what I remember, Piper led the heavy tank assault during the Battle of the Bulge. He was part of the, I want to say, first SS at the time. I think Piper was first SS.
Could be. Been so long.
But leader of one of the heavy tank battalions that sort of was part of the forces that surrounded Bastogne and tried to push on through the Ardennes towards the big port Antwerp. That was the whole objective of this winter offensive, was to take Antwerp, because they thought if they split the Allies in two, then they're going to start bickering with each other. Wasn't really going to happen, but they did. To sum up the Battle of the Bulge, it was Germany's last throw of the dice can we do something that will affect the outcome of the war? And a lot of the generals weren't really convinced, but when Hitler said go do it, they kind of had to go do it at that point. If anything, it shortened the war by several months because of the amount of resources the Germans threw into it. They expelled a lot of fuel, a lot of manpower, and a lot of equipment just to have a chance at changing their outcome, to sort of change the fate a little bit. But unfortunately for them, it didn't work out so well, and it allowed the Allies to really, I think, January 45 and stuff like that is when we started to see the Rhine crossings happening, and things really starting to go the other way.
So it's an iconic section of World War II to play out then, especially at this point. Then,
and it also holds the record of having the worst war movie ever made about it.
Floating gas barrels. Is that what you're thinking of?
Floating gas barrels, and when the movie was made, people were still being shot, pirouetting, completely bloodless. So,
Battle of the Bulge does have. I mean, if anybody's ever heard the Panzerlied, they've heard it because of the film
of the movie, where they only sing the one verse.
They only sing the one verse, and I have to say the sterling work of were the Soviet tanks dressed up as? I wouldn't even say dressed up as tigers. They did nothing to.
They were American Pattons painted grey.
Yeah, they did nothing to pretend that they were.
Tanks are tanks, right, John? Yeah,
pretty much.
They're all the same.
Interesting.
Tracks with guns. That's all they are.
The Bulge is really fascinating because a lot of the Allied commanders didn't think the Germans would attempt to advance through the Ardennes, despite having done exactly that 4 years previously when they invaded France. Say, they were not going to bring any vehicles and men through here. Done it once before. If I hadn't been for that, was it the American engineers?
Yeah,
had a ton of dogged defenses set up that stalled the advance, and the German Kampfgruppe more or less ran out of fuel. They couldn't get through. The whole point was smash the lines and then resupply from the American sort of fuel depots and the like, because they just didn't have the resources left themselves anymore.
What you find interesting from an Allied player's perspective in the Bulge is that when the Germans are coming through, they have that element of 1940s Germany, where we are going to move fast, we're going to do our blitzkrieg again. Problem is they were taking stuff into the blitzkrieg that wasn't fast enough to keep up with the motorized infantry and that. But what you did find happening, which the American army wasn't really prepared for, was having units cut off and surrounded while the Germans advanced on. And what you ended up having was a plethora of really interesting, almost last stand kind of battles. You had Bastogne with the 101st Airborne, which was done with Band of Brothers, covered that pretty well with all the fighting in the snow-covered forests and everything. But you had mixed units, almost American-style Kampfgruppe, where you had bits of the 6th Armored Division, bits of some tank destroyer battalions mixed in with a bit of artillery regiments and a little bit of infantry, and just working with whatever they had available in that area to try and stop whatever the Germans were trying to do. Particularly Bastogne, because Bastogne cannot be underrated in how important it was strategically. It carried every main transport thoroughfare through Bastogne towards Germany or back towards Holland and Antwerp. So all that main supply, all that fuel, ammunition, food was coming through some of those roads to get into the areas that they were fighting for. So the stand at Bastogne, particularly for the 101st Airborne, was like the moment that made airborne forces really be taken note of as an elite force, not just a unit that you can parachute in behind enemy lines. Yeah. These guys really proved how elite they could be and how dogged they could be.
I don't know if it's going to be in the Bulge or if there's going to be a separate book, but Otto Skorzeny, possibly not how that's pronounced, but this is where he had grief, wasn't it? His little, it was the Germans dressed like Americans, and they'd taken Panthers and stuck bits of plate on the side to make them look like M10s from the side, and it changed the Stugs pretending to be artillery was particularly poor. I don't know how that was supposed to work, but I don't know if you've seen that in the book or not, if that's available. Because they have done models for some of the...
They have done the Ersatzgruppen. Yeah, they have done the Ersatzgruppen before. I haven't like I said, I haven't looked through the book properly yet, but I would say I would say it would be a very interesting supplement book, because they do sometimes bring out these little packs.
That's true. Yeah, like they
particular
did with the
things.
Italians and the Airborne and stuff like that. The little tiny booklets.
Yeah.
Anyway, fascinating stuff. If you're interested in playing out late war, it's a great place to start. A lot of interesting and desperate groups brought together for both sides. So plenty of variety and flexibility in there. What's up next, Ben?
So next up, we're looking at something old made new. So this is Return to Dark Tower, which is based on an old board game that some people might remember from the commercials, at least, and probably sometimes on people's boards, on people's tabletop, from 1981. So Return to Dark Tower was a game that was brought out by Restoration Games, who have been sort of bringing a whole bunch of classic board games back to the tabletop over the last couple of years. Rob Davio, Isaac Childress, to name just a couple of the designers, sort of dived in on this one. And this is the news that after the successful Kickstarter, which is now shipping out to a lot of people, I believe it's actually going out to UK people fairly soon as well now, which is quite nice. That it's going to be coming to retail. Currently, it's only in retail for the US and Canada, but they are working to get it to retail for the rest of the world as well very, very soon. For those who are not familiar with this, Return to Dark Tower is an app-assisted board game that also comes with that monolithic electronic tower in the center of the board, which is very akin to the old one that a lot of people will know and remember. And what you do with the game is that it's a cooperative experience, although you can play it competitively as well if you really want to, where you are working together as heroes, going around the world of the Dark Tower, trying to stop the machinations of the evil villain that lives within it. And you will have to undergo quests and go dungeon delving and amass your forces to then take down the big villain once you've been able to complete all the sort of like separate subquests that sort of bring you to the crescendo at the very, very end. The game did absurdly well on Kickstarter. As you can imagine it would do. It's a big, huge board game. And it's now looking to do pretty well at retail as well, I would imagine. The game is actually, like, I've not played it, and I nearly went on the Kickstarter, but then I stopped myself because it was a lot of money, and it still is a lot of money. It's like $190 to play the board game. But if you don't have a big board game like this in your collection already, maybe this is definitely one to go and pick up, I would suggest. The app's really well done. It tells the story and deals with all the background stuff. Not a lot of people have issues with app-based games and that kind of thing, but I think they've done a really good job on this one. There's still a lot of like at-the-table stuff going on, which I think is very important for these kind of games. You don't want it to just all be done by the game app, effectively. But yeah, so as you play, the app sort of controls the actions and sort of takes you on your quests and things like that, resolves all your combats and things. But then the Dark Tower in the center, you throw skulls into it and they land in different areas of the board, and then different sections of the tower light up, and you have to remove sections of it that will reveal glyphs that tell you what bad stuff's going to happen in different areas and that kind of thing as well. So it's a really fun game where I think they've taken the essence of the original and sort of revamped it and brought it back to the tabletop for a modern audience, which I think is really fun. The game itself comes with a whole bunch of stuff in the core set. You've got a whole bunch of heroes to play as. The enemies and stuff are represented by cards and cardboard chits, although the expansions that they've also got that are available for retail include the Dark Horde, which replaces all of the card tokens with miniatures. They're all done very similar to the heroes that you see there, where they're plastic that's been given an ink wash to them. So it sort of like brings out the details in them, which I think is just a really nice little additional touch, I think. And you could probably just play the game with the models like that if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
I'm still a fan of cardboard chits myself, because that's a lot of models. But they range from kind of around sort of like, I'd say like 20 mil for some of the heroes and stuff, through to like a really massive like giant, as you can see on the left of that image there as well. So some pretty epic stuff in there as well. There's also a second expansion, which is the Alliances expansion. It adds in 2 new heroes, as you can see there, as the Arkwright, and I can't remember the name of the next one. It'll be further down when I see the image. There you go, the Haunted Recluse. And this also adds in a couple of additional mechanics as well. So you could play around with sort of working with the various guilds within the game in order to garner more support that you then use to take on the bosses and the other enemies in the game as well. It's a pretty innovative game,
With you,
which
yes.
removes. It's been so long since I've done this, you see, which removes dice from the equation as well, which is always nice. And things are done based on the amount of units you have at your command, and you spend those in order to resolve cards in the game. And the more units you spend, the less effect the card that you're fighting will have on you. So, for example, if you encounter a bunch of wolves in the wild, for example, if you spend nothing on it, then you're going to lose a whole bunch of stuff, and you'll maybe lose items and that kind of thing. The more units you spend on that from your sort of gang of mercenaries, the less effect that card will have until you just defeat it, and it will remove, and you'll move on to the next one and stuff. So it's a really nice system that they've put a lot of effort into. And while it's a little bit of a gimmick, I think, in regards to the tower and all that kind of thing, I think it's definitely one of those that you should definitely give a shot at. So if you see this at a convention or something, maybe there'll be people playing this at UK Games Expo. It's definitely one to go and check out, I think. Really good.
Very interesting. I assumed whenever they were bringing it back out again that it would just be a straight rerun of it, essentially. You know, here it is again, but with updated components and graphics. But it's not just the original rules. Then they've taken in a different.
Yeah, they've added like another spin to it. Yeah. Like they do this with a lot of stuff. Like they did the same with Unmatched, which was based off. I think they originally did it with like Star Wars models back in the day. They've sort of brought that back and redone that and reskinned it to cover a whole bunch of different genres. They did the same thing with Fireball Island, although I think that was more or less very similar to the original release, which is a big, huge plastic gaudy set with little marbles that rolled around and all that kind of thing. But Restoration Games have done some really good stuff, and it's nice to see this going to retail as well. So,
does look interesting. I imagine there was a retailer pledge for the Kickstarter anyway, so people.
Yeah, you might be able to find it in your stores.
Yeah, you may actually be able to get it before they find an actual retailer. So might be worth checking that out, or even having a look at the Kickstarter and see what people are saying in the comments, because you may find answers in there as well. Yeah, terrific stuff. Sticking with old, in this case, we're going to be sticking with some old school comic book action, with more releases coming for Slaine or Slaine from Rebellion and Warlord Games. And this is the upcoming wave. So wave 2 releases, they're not due for another couple of months, but they've previewed and stuck them up on pre-order, and there's a lot coming. So if you're unfamiliar with Slaine, he is a blend of Irish/Celtic mythology meets Conan the Barbarian, who sometimes time travels, depending on how he's feeling. That is the comics. There's 40 odd years of them. There's a lot to be going on with. It'd be difficult to explain it all right now, but they've been
releasing
exciting new things. So the second wave, we've already got a lot of the Druns and the Wild Men and some Fomorians for the first wave. This time around, we get some more esoteric bits and pieces. So things like the Cauldron of Blood, which serves multiple functions in the comics. One is you can chuck your old warriors who are dead into it, and it will resurrect them, and you can push them back out into the fight. Very handy when you're being invaded by sea people. But the other thing is it's also like a doorway to one of the Morrigan's realms where her son lives. And he also hoards one of the magic items that Slaine needs to get his hands on to become High King of Ireland. So, if you've got Uko, you can chuck him in there in a diving suit and send him off to get the Stone of Destiny back out for you. Which I've noticed they haven't actually, they haven't got a tiny Uko yet in a diving suit, and I really want it because he looks so cute in the comics. It's like a little green gnome hat with big eyes. It's very weird.
I reckon it will be coming. They've done some weird. They're doing some weird stuff for it now. So I imagine there will be something in the future. Oh god, yeah. Why
not? Here we have El Women and Elfric. So the El are from the El worlds, which are parallel dimensions / worlds to us. So these are, if you think dark elves and light elves, gives you kind of an idea. They're more like demonic humans rather than actual straight off elves, with various abilities. One of the light elves that Slaine and his friends meet is Pulk, which is a big kind of 3-eyed blobby monster thing. So they're not just the standard, here's an elf and here's an elf that's a bit more vicious. Really nice looking sculpts that really capture the images from the comics as well. That's the What the L set. I do enjoy the puns. The punnage is very good. And then we have, how do you think that's pronounced there, Ben?
The bar.
Bave.
The Bave. Oh, right, of course.
Of course.
Of course.
That's what I'm saying.
I should have gone like I should have thought about that because you've got like Siobhan and all that kind of thing. I should have.
Oh yeah, just start removing letters.
I'll
like French, cover half the letters and then don't pronounce them. Yes. But a trio of warrior women to throw up against whoever might be coming. Sometimes people get out of hand and they need to be slapped back.
I'm loving the haircuts. The haircuts are amazing.
The haircuts are awesome, and again, but very, very close to the actual illustrations. Now, obviously, it's a 40-year-old comic that's still running and has had multiple artists. So sometimes they go in and give them a bit of a revamp, or an artist will draw it in another style. So things like the Fomorians here, so the Sea Devils, they are very definitely I can't remember the artist's name. It might be Glenn's. Anyway, there's an artist who drew them like this, but then later on they were done again by Simon Bisley for the Horned God. That's the earlier Indie of the Week, freaking me out now, where they look more human, rather than this strange. I like
the monstrous style.
I like the monstrous one much better.
Yeah.
Because they kind of just look like human with big sharp teeth, and occasionally you'll hit one that is a bit more fish-like. But for the Fomorians, I think that's the way to go.
They'd be fun to paint as well, I think.
Yeah.
Like fun with the light blue, green, the armor, then add like a little bit of verdigris to it as well, and that kind of thing as well. That'd be nice. Just rust and stuff.
Just mix it all up, and there's more drones. Everybody likes half-dead drones, unlike the resurrected Celts from earlier. These may or may not be still alive, but just on their way out. The drones, the drones are an unusual cult where death and decay is very much order of the day. So, I mean, they may just be malnourished and plagued.
They're past their best before date.
Yeah, very much so. But again, really nice miniatures. If I had one criticism of them, they're cast using Seocast, that style of technology. So they're quite flat because they're one part sculpts. In some cases, it's more noticeable than others. But I like these. I like the wild beasts. Not sure where the porcupines come from.
I said in the news story for this, I was like, I get why the others are vicious, but then I was like, why is the porcupine vicious? And then I'd be like, well, I'll probably end up with spines in my ass if I tried to fight one of these.
They'll be stuck everywhere unless you're a honey badger. You're not coming out of that without a massive spiking. It's nice to see.
I was going to say, I like to think that because it's like a fantasy porcupine, it's probably got like a massive distended jaw that can eat you or something.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. It's fascinating to see where they're going, and the fact that they always seem to be, at least currently, they're following the sort of the triptych of Fomorians, Earth Cult, and then the Druns. So they haven't just gone, well, here's two factions to begin with. They've added the third in, and they're keeping them up fairly evenly as well.
They've packed it out quite nicely in short order as well, which is quite good to say. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to wait a little while for those to come. Well, yes. I want to say they're shipping like end of June or so it's like a month or so away before they come. I can't honestly remember. I know I seen it on the pre-orders when I was looking at it, so there's a little while, but it gives people a chance to get in there and pick up.
A lot of people in the project's playing Slaine, so yeah.
An awful lot of people seem to have jumped on board with it. They're obviously fans of the comics, and it's nice to see. It's nice to see miniatures coming out to do it justice. Game as
and you can watch our Let's Play as well if you want to find out more about it.
So. Yeah, there may even be more of those Let's Plays coming as soon as we manage to. I think we may just need to hardwire Monster energy drinks into Justin to give him enough hours in the day to edit everything for us. But, that's one way of doing it anyway. But yeah, who's up next then?
So next up, we're sticking with the realm of fantasy, but something that's new, or at least coming soon. So at the beginning of June, Blacksite Studios, who do a lot of work creating fascinating and interesting skirmish games, are going to be bringing us their diceless fantasy skirmish wargame called Yafsiga, which I think is a really cool name. As they said in their live stream for this, they hope it doesn't mean anything rude. They Googled it and it doesn't. But it's probably like the unpronounceable word that you shall not name in some forgotten country. But anyway, so Yafsiga is going to be a skirmish game in the sort of advent of traditional skirmish games, where it's a small model count game, maybe sort of like 4 or 5 figures per side, played out in, and I think this is really cool, on a 2x2 board. So a lot of people, when they're playing their games, it comes on 3x4, 4x4, that kind of thing. They have really embraced this idea of very small, concentrated games, dense terrain, as you can see there, 4 or 5 buildings per board that really pack it out, lots of additional bits and pieces in there. And then the game itself is played out, again, like a typical skirmish war game. It's a 2-player affair, although they have said that they're going to be throwing some things in there for maybe playing multiplayer scenarios as well in the future, where you use poker cards in order to resolve all of the sort of actions you do, the damage you do, and all that kind of thing as well. And also the activation of the different characters. So it's all tied into things like, as you can see there, like an ace for your leader, and then king, queen, jack, and stuff for your different characters as well when they activate, which I think is really cool. They do go into a lot more detail as to how the mechanics work in this video. So I would highly recommend watching it. The first sort of like, I think it's 30 minutes to 40 minutes is then basically giving an overview of what Yafsiga is all about. The idea is that it's a game world where it was almost a traditional fantasy world in many regards, a little bit slightly more on the grim, more authentic, realistic side of things, when a big magical event happens, as it often does. And now a huge section of this fantasy world has been overtaken by this weird, glittering, beautiful light and cosmic energy that has sort of turned and twisted everything within it. And so what the different warbands and countries and factions are doing is they're heading into this strange cosmic entity in order to find secrets and reclaim portions of it for their empire and that kind of thing. So it's a game that's very much based on the idea of sort of grim, darky stuff, but with a really nice sort of weird kind of 70s, 80s, the disco is the wrong word. Psychedelic would probably be the right way.
Yeah.
Psychedelic twist, I think, is really cool.
Yeah. I think that is
prevalent
based on the cover there. Yeah.
Exactly.
See, to me, the cover image looks like it's you're going to open that and you're going to see like furniture designs that IKEA never went with.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the monsters are named after IKEA things. Yes.
It would explain the naming.
Yeah. But so the game looks really good so far. The miniatures they've been designing for them are looking really nice as well. Again, sort of going for that kind of grim, realistic aesthetic, but then tying in some sort of fancy elements at the same time. It's got like a real like Elden Ringy Dark Souls feel to it, I think, which is quite nice. Again, where the game has got that very grounded sense to it when it comes to the arms and armor, but then there are always weird cosmic stuff thrown in at the side at the same time.
Yeah.
This is just a couple of the different miniatures they've been working on at the moment. They're going to come out alongside the game when it releases in June. But the big thing they've said is that you don't have to use these as they used in the demo game. The game has been designed to be miniature agnostic. So if you have 28 to 32 mil models, you can use whatever you want.
Fairly similar with Matt Beckley sculpts from Claymore Casting there.
Yes. Quite a few of them.
I noticed that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a really fascinating looking game. I'm always up for more people doing fun skirmish game ideas. I like the idea that it's diceless, moving away to a slightly more card-based feel for the game. They have said that kind of adds another layer of strategy to things, because with dice, you've always got the element of randomness to it, and you can mitigate things as much as you like, but it's still the roll of a dice. With this, there can be, and they have said this has come up in playtesting, a little bit of like a card counting thing. So as you go through different turns in the game, you'll be like, there's only a certain amount of cards in my deck that will allow me to do certain things. So if you're playing from a slightly more gamey, competitive side of things, you can always bring that into effect as well, which I think is really fun. You
can sit there going, I know 3 of the 4 aces are done and dusted, so I'm less likely to run into that. Yeah, that's sort of just one step away from Dustin Hoffman for gaming then.
Yeah. I will say as well, I did mention that they've got kind of like a gamey element to it as well, if you really wanted to go down that route. But the main focus for the guy who designed it was that he wanted it to be narrative and tell a story. Like all the games that they've created up until this point, so Don't Look Back and Luna and the Alien one, Into the Dark or Dark or something, whatever it's called, they're all very much focused on the idea of narrative and storytelling. And this is doing exactly the same kind of thing. And I love that now Blacksite have kind of created like a triumvirate of things now. They have sci-fi, they have horror, and now they have fantasy. So it's all very cool. They just need to do something historical next, I guess. But
well, if the system works well, depending on how much weird and wacky stuff is in there, potentially it could be used for historic anyway. All you need to do is just take the wackiness out and then just play the standard people. Yeah. I like the choice to stick with a 2-foot square.
Yes.
There's a certain amount of immediacy to your gameplay when you're playing on something that small.
Yeah.
Because, you're not having to think about, well, I've got 2 turns before they reach me. You're just going, well, they can already hit me, and this move then becomes much more important. The opening maneuvers and first sort of interactions become very, very interesting.
I think it becomes more immediate as a hobby as well, because and a YouTuber was talking about this actually this week, like space can become a premium with a lot of people, and a lot of people don't have space to have 6x4 boards in their homes. I mean, I know I don't. And so a lot of people, to have a 2x2 square that could fit on pretty much any table, and then you've simply just got to have room for your cards and all that kind of thing. And then you're making maybe 3 or 4 pieces of terrain, building it up as you go through different scenarios, couple of bits of scatter, and boom, away you go, really. So
or if it's
a really nice way to go.
If you already have 3 and 4 larger war games.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're sitting with enough stuff for Kings of War or whatever, then potentially you've got multiple tables worth when you drop it down to 2x2 as well. So you can explore things. You can do your little villages and cities and outside in the tree line and all the rest with a handful of items rather than having to break the bank and fill all the cupboards with your train. So
I'm sure we'll talk about it more when it starts up in June as well. So we'll come back to this.
Look forward to that. Right, one final bit of news then for today. What are we looking at?
So I missed all the cool Games Workshop news over the last couple of weeks, but they are going to be releasing a new set for Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So it's another one of their box sets that kind of continues the narrative and builds on things, and it uses some of the models that were previewed during the Warhammer Fest events a couple of weeks ago. So this is the new Echoes of Doom set. They'll be up for pre-order this weekend. Comes with the Sylvaneth versus the Skaven. Hey, look, we're getting the Skaven back in there, Jerry.
We know who's got your bell, mate.
Exactly. There we go. Yeah. So on the Skaven side of things, you get a bunch of clan rats and the storm vermin. They're the plastic kits that everybody knows. There's the Grey Seer and the Screaming Bell that, again, a lot of people will be familiar with. But the new model is going to be the Deathmaster that you can see just there in the center, doing his best stealthy impression as he hides in the units. So a new Deathmaster, not Deathmaster Snitch, unfortunately. He's long gone, but he's back in spirit. You've also then got the Sylvaneth side of things as well, where they get to draw on a whole bunch of new models, actually. So this is kind of going with that vibe where Games Workshop kind of do, like, this side gets 1 new model, this side gets 1 billion new models. So for the Sylvaneth, you get the Lady of Vines, who's the new model that they showcased during Warhammer Fest, alongside the Gosnamid archers that you see there at the bottom, with the kind of beetles latched onto their backs, sort of lifting them into the air to do their shootings. You've also then got the Kernoth hunters, which I think are some of the coolest models they've ever done. Really, really awesome. And then the Tree Man as well, which a lot of people will be familiar with. If you're looking to maybe bulk up an existing army for Warhammer Age of Sigmar, or maybe start out with a couple of new armies, then maybe share this with a friend. As well as that, Warcry is going to be getting an update very soon, and that means new box sets and all that kind of thing. But to that end, they've also re-released some of the older models that were available with one of the last box sets. If you are going to look to dive into the Varanite mines, you'll be able to pick up the new Dark Oath Savages that have been reboxed for you to use in Warcry, alongside the Tarantulos Brood as well. So you've got your spidery cults and your sort of more standard Chaos Barbarian Marauders as well. Again, really like what they did with Warcry, sort of building all the different Chaos cults and stuff. It kind of adds a lot more flavor to that kind of undivided feel to Chaos. Sort of steps away from it just being about Khorne and Tzeentch and Nurgle and Slaanesh and that kind of thing, which is always nice.
Well, we're fairly certain we know who they support anyway.
Well, yes.
But yeah, but I'd say those are more interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I definitely think so, yeah.
Poor spider people.
Apparently they graft their spider bits onto their bodies to make them more like spiders, which is a really cool thing.
Why not? So, yeah. What better way to show your appreciation for your spider god than by killing their spiders and sticking them to yourself?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's really what you want.
No, these spiders fell off the tree. But yeah, so you've got those two new warband sets alongside two new terrain sets as well. So these again kind of take the terrain from the last box set and put them out as individual sets. So you've got the Pit Dredger camp and the Varanite Siphon camp as well. So if you want to get your hands on those terrain pieces, you can indeed do so. And everyone knows, well, everyone who's read some of the lore, is that Varanite is very good for turning people into gods. So maybe you'll be picking this up to turn yourself into a god in Age of Sigmar.
Right, it's like Warpstone, is that what you tell me?
Yeah. That's what Marathi used to turn into a god in Age of Sigmar. So yeah, it is basically Warpstone. Yeah. So.
Just eat the green rock, say nothing.
Exactly. Yeah.
There you go. That, I think, wraps us up for another week's worth of news.
Boom. Yeah.
We shall take a quick swish, and when we come back, we'll be looking at some Kickstarters and 3D printing. Okay, we're back, and we're going to take a look at some 3D printing. Free set a very high bar last week, Ben. I'm not saying that you're going to have to really pitch high on this one or feel like a massive failure, but it was good. It's very good.
I'm going to fill out the massive failure box on my phone.
With that in mind.
Oh, yeah.
So who are we going to be looking at this week?
So this week, we're going to be looking at someone that you wouldn't necessarily have thought would be doing 3D printing. Spectre. Well, this is Jerry Miniatures. Squirrel Miniatures.
Squirrel Miniatures.
Yeah. Spectre Miniatures are well known for Spectre operations. There you go. And their extensive metal collection. That's not of albums, of miniatures that are used for fighting out modern warfare style conflicts on the tabletop. Well, they, over the last couple of, I'd say the last year or so, have started to dabble in different techniques and different sculpting methods. A lot of their stuff originally was hand sculpted. Then they started moving over to doing 3D design work and that kind of thing. And that's a sort of found its way into their collection as well. And now they've decided to take the next step and move towards creating digital miniatures through Patreon. Hence, 3D printing is the shares. They are very new to the idea of Patreon and this kind of system. And so they are working with their community at the moment in order to find the right balance of what they offer per month. Although the way that they've been looking to do it is that they're going to be doing 1 month where they do a single figure, and then the next month they'll do a squad. So the idea is that they will cycle through this to create different specialists and then different squads of specialists to kind of keep an interesting sort of tempo going across the year and stuff, which I think is really cool.
That makes sense.
Their main focus, they've created a whole bunch of amazing modern warfare style miniatures over the last however many years with all sorts of different kit and that kind of thing. But one of the interesting things is that to create some of the slightly more esoteric pieces, it would cost a lot of money to create those in metal only for maybe a limited run.
Yeah, 3 people to buy them.
Yeah. And so what they're trying to do with the Patreon is that they are going to create those slightly more esoteric miniatures with the unique kit and the unique weapons and different styles and stuff so that you can then print them off at home and then add them into your force. So if you wanted to get like the particular sniper that they've created for the first month, then you can do that. And then that can just be slotted into your army, however you like. And they've not had to worry about metal and all that kind of stuff and that kind of process. So I think it's a really nice way for them to be using modern techniques in order to reinforce what they already do, which I think is quite nice. A lot of people have been, one of the big challenges they faced was that a lot of people were like, well, why would I back this if I could back a Patreon that gives me 40 models per month or something? And then they came back with, well, we're new to this. And also they were like, if you play Spectre, you don't need 40 models.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you would just be pledging for stuff that you need to play your game, which I think is a good way of viewing things.
The fact that it could go into other games is neither here nor there. They're designing stuff based on the company. Weirdly, we had a chat about that in last week's Cult of Games show about
talking about 3D printing,
3D printing and about the value of it, because there are people who I think they only back. I don't even know if they print the stuff out. It's like, well, it's only X dollars a month, and I get amount of models, and they just sit there and stockpile files upon files upon files without ever actually producing anything at the end of the day. But yeah, I like the idea of them cycling through as well, where I know a few patrons that started and it was, here's what you're going to get every month, and then there's struggle to maintain it, so you're hitting the second week of the month before they finally get previews up, and then people because people are about where's my previews, where's this, where's that, and you're going, well, the whole point of this is to develop new things and to get stuff out there, and by swapping between a squad and a miniature and a squad and a miniature individually means they don't have the pressure then of having to get a new squad out every 4 weeks or whatever it happens to be. So that's fascinating.
One of the other nice things they've said is that they want to try and offer things that aren't just miniatures based as well. So obviously you've got patrons out there that create written content and all that kind of thing as well. So one of the things they wanted to do is they wanted to try and provide backers with scenarios that they can play based around the miniatures that they create and stuff, which I think is a really nice idea. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of print the model and then just go straight into playing the game with it either digitally on a tablet or something, or just print off the rules yourself, just dive straight into the game. They want to try and look at doing sort of mods to Spectre. So Spectre is like a really cool game that's like very in-depth, really cool sort of low model count with like an elite force against a slightly more numerous enemy in most cases. You often have a GM that's in control of the action as well, which I think is really nice. They have been talking about making a World War II mod for this. So you'd play as a squad of elite World War II soldiers, so like SAS or something, going in to do sort of missions behind enemy lines and things. Little bit like 0200 hours and that kind of stuff, which is fed out at the moment as well. So I think that's really on the zeitgeist at the moment, I think. But yeah, it's just really fun to see them doing stuff that isn't just model based as well. So obviously these kind of things are coming down the pipeline. But this is something to kind of keep your eye on, I think. And if you are already a fan of Spectre and the game that they create, Operations, then I think this is one to go and have a look at. Because maybe if you don't have a 3D printer yourself, you'll probably know someone who does. And if that's within your circle of friends that play Spectre and that kind of thing, then you can maybe work together to get these things printed off and start adding them into your games and playing them at home. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because they started doing the STLs.
Yeah, as terrain and that kind of thing.
And generic little bits for whether it happens to be scatter or whatever. Bins are always good. Everybody likes big wheelie bins around the back of the place. Also, the Hesco barriers are great. And surprisingly useful in a whole slew of theatres as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting to see. And I assume this is the very first month then?
Yes, it is, yeah.
So if people are unaware of their moderns, now's a good time to jump in, especially when they're talking about engaging with the community to see what they want to develop next. And that's a good way to go about it.
Yeah, as you say, I think that's a big part of this. It's just starting out, and if you want to help out with kind of decision making and all that kind of thing, then back the Patreon and become one of the people that sort of influences where they go next and stuff. So yeah, very cool.
I imagine even if you're not a big 3D printer, it's not a particularly large amount per month. But if you're a Spectre player, you could, for £3 a month, you can get involved just to keep an eye on what's going on, which means then you'll have access to the game materials, even if you're not planning on actually printing off any of the STLs themselves. So yeah, that is very interesting and right on the cusp.
Very wee, but good.
I like it. It's nice to see more moderns. Nice to see more modern stuff coming from Spectre Miniatures as well.
Did you win one of our prizes? Find out on our prize claim center over at OnTableTop.com. Here we list all our previous prizes and those who have won. If you see your username, fill out the form to claim your prize. All prizes must be claimed within 30 days.
Okay, we will dive into some Kickstarters. And because we had such a tiny little 3D printy one, we're doing 3 this week, although they're all still relatively teeny tiny as well. We're going to be kicking off our first Kickstarter with a game that I actually got to play with Paul, one of our community members, Steel Colosseum. So this is Zatu's first game. Up until now, Zatu have been a publisher or distributor rather instead of a publisher, and this is Needy Cat Games redesign of sort of Robot Fight Club, and they've gone with a very, I'm going to say, 80s punk aesthetic.
Yeah,
everything is so bright and poppy. So bright, so poppy. Look at those colors. But the idea is you take control of essentially a controller for one of these giant robots, fighting it out in an arena to batter 7 shades of armor plating off your opponent. There's some interesting bits and pieces of the mechanic, apart from the fact that you can steal the armor off people and run off. There's like a drafting system behind the game, and that goes for every part of it. So you start off with the pilot. Now, if you're just playing a basic game, the pilot doesn't make a difference. But the pilot cards on the back then have their own unique operator abilities. So the operators have a influence on how the bots actually activate and move, and special abilities that they can do. Then there are the big robots themselves that come in at various tonnage. I like him with his giant Magnetron is awesome. But they're draftable as well. But then also your upgrades are all draftable. So when you're starting a game, the first thing you do is, is there a specific robot that you want to use? Because in that case, you may want to grab that first. There's me. Hello, me. So you may want to grab the robot first, or if there's a particularly decent piece of kit that you want to use, and it doesn't matter what robot it's going to go on, because you know that and your play style will make it worthwhile, then maybe you might want to grab that before your opponent gets it, because you don't know what's going to be coming out there, and you play like a best of 3 rounds as well. So what you have and what you have available to buy for scrap changes between rounds. So you may find that you might not see that card again if it's bought. So it's a really interesting combination of drafting, and then the game itself plays out very quickly on a very small board section that you're constantly changing between battles. So it's all about getting the scrap and knocking the scrap off your opponent, because they don't get to repair in between. So you may find that you're having to use the scrap that you've picked up rather than buy new items to actually just repair your robots to make sure that they've got a chance. Because if they've got knocked off the back of them, it makes them very weak and vulnerable, and there's only so much you can do hugging a wall in the game. So yeah, it's a fascinating game, and really, really enjoyable to play. Simply because of all of those choices in there. I really like the fact that they have a myriad of draft options in there. And normally when you're playing something like this, you're going, well, I'm going to have this robot, I'm going to have that. They've got kind of 2 heavy, couple of mediums, and like 1 super light, but they've all got their own unique, quirky little benefits and actions that they can do. So one of the lightest ones here, the parkour robot, I can't remember its name, unfortunately, but it's got 2 little weedy arms on one side. But if it uses that as an action, it can double punch and actually spin your opponent 90 degrees in that direction, leaving them then open for somebody else to come in and shoot them in the behind. So if you are hugging a wall, you've got to deal with that. The dog-like robot gets to harvest, run off, and pick up and play fetch with scrap, things like that. And Juggernaut has got a massive spinny body, so he can just whirlwind, like me fighting an invisible wasp by spinning and spinning.
I really liked the thing you mentioned and stuff, and we've seen it in gameplay and things where, like, between the rounds, you spend the scrap to like upgrade and change things. So if something's not particularly working, you'd be like, okay, so how do I counter this? I'll buy this upgrade and that kind of thing. But then you can never be sure what upgrades are going to be available for you to buy because of the way that the deck is created and constructed. So you always have to be thinking about things in the moment, which I think keeps like a really nice pace to the game, which is really cool. So
yeah, I mean, when you're doing the draft at the start, you may just go, you know what, I've got the robots I want.
Yeah,
I'm going to hang on to the scrap I've got and not bother because they all come with a standard attack that's unique to them anyway, and they have. If you're playing with the operator ability as well, then it doesn't really matter. Sheba 0, that's it. They fetch. It doesn't matter what way you're playing, but if you've got a little pile of scrap sitting beside you, even if you just about win or come out on top or take a bit of a hiding, you're probably in a much better position for the second round compared to your opponent who may have blown all their cash reserves on whatever bits and pieces they want to have in advance. And there's something great about putting jump jets on something the size of Juggernaut and flying them over a wall in the middle of the arena when your opponent isn't expecting it. I just really like the idea of sticking jets on him. But otherwise he can just trundle his way up and plant people quite happily. Sheba 0. That's what their little fetchy dog was called. But yeah, the idea behind being able to upgrade between games as well as upgrade at the start means you've got an awful lot of choices. If you just want to go for something wacky like sticking jump jets on Juggernaut and being able to fly over the top of walls in the middle of the game, you can do that. Or you can just...
I'm going to be like a bumblebee then.
Yeah.
Just like...
Or just stockpile all of your scrap to give you benefits in going into the second or cool. Third game if you need to. I mean, there's a lot of replayability in there, even with the initial core set. I really like the way they have the board set out as well. I don't know if this is going to be the final production for the board or if they're planning on doing anything else with it. Because at the moment it's got such a poppy retro style to it that it may come off as a bit busy for some people.
I think it looks good.
I think it looks good, but if we do that might be a better impression. Stop Anyway, stop the spin. Are you going to focus on anything at any stage, or are you just going to keep spinning until I get nauseous? There we are. We are going to stop the spinning.
It's Neil Buchanan.
There you go. There is the game board. So the little scrap tokens move around, and then you've got these blue power-up bits. Yeah. And when you go over a power-up bit, then you get to activate bits on your card. So that may be a bit busy for people. I don't mind it. It has a very distinct graffiti look, an 80s graffiti or 90s electro funk look to everything. So it's great to see all of the poppy colors. I don't know how well that will clash for other people, but you've got the potential then to play 2-player or 3 or even 4-player games as well. Yeah. So you can really change up how things go. And if you're playing with multiplayer, so if you're playing 2v1, then the way the decks are constructed and you play out your turns changes slightly as well. So you get benefits for having less cards, but you're able to cycle them more easily compared to your opponents in that respect. So Nidica have done a great job in putting the rules set together, and it's nice to see Zatu reaching out to them and essentially just going, you know what, we'd love to see this game actually out there. There's Relay, who you have to by law say parkour every time Relay jumps something.
Parkour.
It's all good. But yeah, a fascinating game, and I like the fact that they haven't gone out of their way to go, this is all symmetrical. We don't have 2 lights and 2 mediums and 2 heavies that are all equally matched. They're all distinct robots, and then regardless of what operator you're going to stick behind it, it changes up massively how the game plays out as well.
Yeah, it's a really neat way of doing it. Yeah.
So there's 18 days left on that. Mm-hmm. And if you want to jump into some robot battles, remember the first rule of Steel Colosseum is to always talk about Steel Colosseum.
But only in binary.
But only, as you say, in binary. Discuss. Yeah. Our second game that is coming to Kickstarter, or it's actually on Kickstarter, is from Themeborne.
Mm.
And this is Strike HQ, which is
engage the Hellmart theme.
Fascinating little game.
Kind of.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
The guys from Themeborne, John and Tom, were over. I got to play with them, and when we were they were teaching me the game beforehand. He just had all of the Command & Conquer music playing on his phone while we were playing this. And there's a very valid reason. Even though this is a World War II game, it is developed to play like an RTS video game, but on the tabletop. So you have two factions facing off against each other. In this case, it's Axis and Allies. But you have to construct your base to bring stuff in and then attack your opponent. And the first person to destroy the other person's base wins. And that in itself is always good for a laugh because there's so many different ways you can do it, up to and including dropping a nuclear bomb on them, which is just auto win. If you can get an atomic bomb dropped, then you are the victor. However, that is not as easy as it sounds. And this is, I think they keep changing card game terms. When I was a kid, it was just a card game. I believe this is an expandable card game. So
that's how I've thought of it, or living card game, I guess, because you know what's going to be in the other packs, I guess. So
yeah. So it's not blind buys or anything like that. The standard game and expansion come with a set number of cards. And then afterwards, if you want to do deck building, you're doing it within what cards are available. But it's a fascinating way they've got it working. So if you haven't seen our Let's Play, and you really should see our Let's Play, because I love fun.
There's a lot of giggling.
John. Yeah. John gets very nervous. I think it'd be good to play poker against him. What can I say? But essentially, you have a setup where you have a hand of cards. In fact, you have two decks of cards, a support card, and then sort of a recruit card. And here you can see the deployment. So on each side, you've got your headquarters, which your opponent is aiming to kill. And then you can travel between Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo locations. And so by taking and holding these objectives, you get the supplies you need to recruit or to build. But you only have a limited number of things you can do per turn. So you're currently limited to 4. Now that could be 4 moves, or it could be 4 builds, or it could be 4 recruits, or it can be any combination in there, depending on how you want to go about doing it, which means you've got a little amount of time at the start. You can see us giggling away. Look at us giggle. Giggly giggle peoples. You've got a set amount of time. I suggested they put egg timers in these just to really ratchet up the tension, because you fill in your little board blind, both set them down, and then you reveal them at the same time. And when you reveal them, then you go about playing out in initiative order, whether that happens to be recruiting or bringing new things in. And in most cases, they are hidden until your opponent gets a position where they can actually see them, either by moving in to take the objective or to battle them, or by sending recon planes in. So you could send a recon plane to my HQ to see what I had here stacked up. However, if he'd arrived over here to discover that one of these was anti-aircraft, then he gets acked out of the sky. So it is combined arms in that you are looking at land, sea, and air, and you've got infantry and armor, but you're also building up your forces while at the same time trying to protect them. Now, unlike RTSs, where you must have a barracks to produce men, they don't have that. Instead, you can always produce your men, your vehicles, your ships and subs. However, if they get killed, they can't be replaced unless you happen to have an airfield or a naval dockyard or a barracks or a tank construction plant. So you have to sort of gear up at the same point where you're trying to launch attacks, because if you spend so much time base building, you'll find that you're not got the reserves because your opponent's taken half of the board. Whereas if you push off too early, like I may or may not have done in some games, you can take an awful lot of objectives very quickly, but then you leave yourself hamstrung because you don't have the defenses back at your base, and all your opponent has to do is keep chipping away at that, and it's good night Vienna. So it's a very quick game to play through, very quick game to pick up, but immense fun.
And no spoilers, but Jerry's phrase was, "They know what they signed up for."
Yeah, well, you know. But
I wonder why he said that.
they may have known what they signed up for. Some of them may have been drafted, but however, c'est la vie. But yeah, it's a fascinating idea because I'd never seen anybody
really
attempting
fun,
to approach an RTS on the tabletop before.
I think Legends of Sigmar is probably the only other game that kind of tries to play with that idea.
Yeah, and that's only for the campaign version for... Well, actually, no, Legend, because I'm thinking of Fantasy Commander, the smaller
But this
version.
actually properly plays out the movement of things, the fog of war, the developing of bases, having to do things at the same time. Because I love what, as I think it was Thomas was saying, like, when everything's revealed and then things happen, it feels like you're having to do all the different things that you'd have to do in an RTS at once, where your troops are attacking one place and you're having to drag and select and send someone over there. And then you're also building a barracks at home and that kind of thing. So, very cool.
Another interesting thing is because you're doing that, and like we weren't playing with a timer, but we were trying to play it in relatively sharp order. So you're going, okay, well, I want to go move the unit from A to B and then move the unit from A to C. But you have to arrange your battle groups top to bottom in the stack. So if you panic or get things slightly out of order, you can look at your stuff as much as you want. All you're doing is, burning your own time. But you hit that point where you go, okay, and my next move is to echo, and you'd flip the card and it's the wrong one. And now you've sent infantry off to be annihilated by light tanks because you just weren't paying attention. So yeah, the sequencing of play within the card game as well is very interesting. Keeps the game enjoyable as well because you're never quite certain what your opponent has got face down at those things, even if you're trying to keep an eye on where bits and pieces are going. And because you can spread out and base build at different objectives, it means you don't have all the eggs in one basket. So you can keep things further out. It just means you need to keep forces with them as well. But the further out you go, then the more prone you are to counterattack as well. Or because in an RTS style, because you both move simultaneously, you can have troops going past each other. So we've had that where people, you think I'm going to go and hammer him at Charlie, and you go off to Charlie location, and he's gone the opposite direction. He's just passed you in the street going to Bravo, and all of a sudden you're left there looking very bemused. So yeah, I can see a lot of people getting involved with this, and also the fact that they can expand it in different directions if they wish. So obviously they're talking about one expansion already, which will then allow you to do sort of deck building within it. You'll have a set number of cards, but maybe instead of having your standard base that allows you to build 5 things around it and only contain 10 supplies, so like 10 energy can go in there. So if you want to build an atomic bomb, you need 15 supplies. You can't do that in a standard base without building a supply depot, which takes up one of your spots. But maybe you take the card that has the 15 slot supply, so you don't have to build that, but it may have less health on it, or be restricted in some other way. So after the initial game where you're kind of going to know what your opponent's got, but not how they're going to play it, there then comes the option to start building custom decks and playing in different ways. Playing an infantry and airborne heavy left. And you just don't know what your opponent's going to do there. So yeah, I think it's a tremendous little game that has a lot of potential to go in a lot of different directions over time.
So. Yeah, they did good iterations with the Escape the Dark, whatever games. So I hope to see more of that. And the artwork from Neil Roberts is amazing as well. So
the prototype they brought over had, I'm going to say maybe half the cards had got artwork on them, and they looked sensational. There's a lot more coming, but also I like the idea that you could potentially change the layout of your board as well. So instead of having that 7 setup, so 2 bases and then 5 objectives, maybe you put on a couple of other objective cards and play a longer game where there's more variation in where things can move to.
Like changing maps to an RTS. Yeah.
Exactly. But all you're doing is playing with 5 or 6 cards, so you can play
all your bases belong to us.
Well, they belong to somebody. Generally, I've discovered they belong to John once he's finished kicking my toys in multiple games. But there's always time for Ruwenge, and one day I will have my Ruwenge. So there are 27 days left. That's just kicked off this week. So if you fancy taking a go at some Red Alert style World War II action on the tabletop, then check out Themeborne's Strike HQ. And last but by no means least, Ben, An old friend.
Yeah, we're going to be finishing off with Warzone, which is being resurrected, but not that game. We're seeing Warzone Eternal walk back to the tabletop thanks to Resnova Games and Brian Steele, who a lot of people will know worked on Dark Age and a bunch of other games as well.
Wrath of Kings.
Wrath of Kings, of course, yeah. So this is the officially licensed Skirmish game that's coming from Resnova that allows you to dive back into the world of Warzone. As we said when we discussed this a couple of months ago now, Brian has basically worked with Resnova in order to bring back the feel of the old school game of Warzone. So this isn't like a large-scale war game, although you can obviously play with as many models as you like. The idea of this is that it's meant to be played with a low model count. You can start out with less than 10 figures, but they say that some games can expand to between 10 and 20 figures. The rules have been designed so that it very much enhances that kind of narrative, skirmish, almost role-play style of game that you got back in the day when you play as the different mega corporations fighting for control of the tabletop, fighting over objectives and all that kind of thing as well. The game uses an action point system that is sort of previewed in their rules primer that you're able to check out over on the Kickstarter page at the moment. It also uses alternative activations, which is always a win, where things will go back and forth between each of the different players at the tabletop. And there are also new reactions that they've added into the game mechanics as well. So if you're familiar with the kind of ARO style effect that you get from Infinity, they've kind of added something that's akin to that, but not quite as open in interpretation as it is in Infinity. You know, you can do a lot of stuff within those AROs. In this, there's only a select few actions that you can do in that kind of thing. So again, very simple and easy to play game that has been designed so that you can dive straight in and play with a small handful of figures per side, which I think is really nice to see. Again, as I've said already in the show, like skirmishy style games are the way forward for me. I think that they're very, very cool. He says as he paints Alpha Legion for Horus Heresy. But anyway, so each of the boxes will come with options for you to build a whole bunch of new models. They've been designed by an array of different creators. They're not as cookie cutter as you see here on these pages, I should add. So a lot of people have looked at this and gone, what, so 5 of my guys all look the same? No, thankfully. They all will look different. There will be options for you to build different figures. So I think most of the box sets will allow you to build between 5 and 6 unique figures for each of the warband, each of the sort of teams that you create, all armed with special weapons or regular weapons, however you see fit. It's really nice to see some of the more painted figures popping up actually as part of this at the moment. It's just that when they were doing this initially and setting up the Kickstarter, a lot of the renders weren't ready when they were putting together the Kickstarter page. So don't worry. You're not getting a whole bunch of the same miniature in each of these sets, which is always nice to see. So they've all been designed to create sort of like the feel and the aesthetic of the old school Warzone, but with modern techniques. Again, as we discussed a couple of months ago, they've kind of really sort of honed in on what made Warzone fun for a lot of people back in the day and tried to bring that back to the tabletop, which I think is quite nice. They've done 6 of the factions, so you can play as Capital, Bauhaus, Imperial, Cybertronic, Mishima, and then Algeroth as well. Although Algeroth have 3 separate sets because there's like so many weird and crazy things in their set for you to play around with, which I think is quite nice. But if you see something in here and you're like, where are my favorite figures? They are hoping that this is going to expand and grow over the years, and they are going to put a lot of effort into making sure that this like really pops on the tabletop, which I think is quite nice to see. But yeah, I think they've managed to cover pretty much all the bases when it comes to sort of like the basics of Warzone, I think. And it'll be really good to see them dive a little bit more in depth with the rules in the near future. As I say, like Brian's been great on the games that he's created in the past. And he has like a real enthusiasm for Warzone, which comes through in all the videos that he does. They have said they're going to be doing like a battle report video for the Kickstarter page. It may be out when you're seeing this. It may be in a couple of days. So if you've looked at the rules primer and you're like, I want to know how this actually plays out properly, don't worry, there is a video coming from Resnova, which is going to dive into more detail. But I think they've done a pretty solid job with this one so far. And if you're a Warzone fanatic, as I know a lot of people are, hopefully this will be a good way for you to dive back in and play more Warzone at the tabletop, because Up until now, we have had miniatures games that have been and gone. Obviously, Mutant Chronicles has existed from Modifius for the last couple of years, but that's obviously been more of a role play side of things. So it's nice to see the miniatures game back on the tabletop. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
if people aren't aware of it, of the Mutant Chronicles universe, if you think a heavily World War I inspired sci-fi, you're not far off. It's not actually steampunk, even though you may see people running about the place in pickle helms or the old Tommy steel pot helmets on them. But it has that design and aesthetic behind it. But yeah, it's always an interesting one. So much so that Hellboy was in a film based on it.
Yeah.
He was. Not a good film.
It's also as grim and nasty as 40K in many regards as well. So, but with a little bit more of like a tongue-in-cheek comic feel to it, I think, as well in times as well. So
very much so. Yeah, there's definitely room for expansion and potential there. It'd be nice to see somebody taking a run at it and giving it the sort of the due it's deserved. Because I'm curious to see where they go and what way it takes us. I had little Capital and Bauhaus Force many moons ago myself. So,
I had Imperial back in the Resurrection days. So,
that's where mine were the old target
the old
game
proper
led ones. Yeah. So,
the ones that we looked at from Prince August.
So, if Bauhaus Blitzers, obviously awesome. Bauhaus mounted on Raptors, fantastic. And then, it's a good way to go.
I will also say that there is just the option to pledge for the PDF or the physical rulebook. So if you, like Jerry, have some miniatures lying around, or you have a love for those old miniatures, like we looked at from Prince August, that you can still buy, and you have all those stuff out there, you can just use those old miniatures with the new game, and it should be pretty on point. I mean, all the old stuff is there. You got your blood berets and all that kind of thing. So
yeah, I think cool. They said the PDFs will also have the cards, because the cards will come with the boxes for their stat cards. And I seen somebody asking, does that mean my faction won't have any rules for a year? What? No, the plan is to have the cards out as PDFs, and then people can use what they have. And if you get the actual miniatures, then you'll have the physical cards to go with anyway.
Yeah, the idea is that the rulebook can then be evergreen in that respect.
Yeah.
So you'll only have to buy one rulebook. You'll then just only have to buy additional things if they update cards and that kind of stuff in the future. So pretty good.
Sweet like candy. Right. I think that wraps us up for another week. We
did it.
We shall return next Friday. But if you can't wait that long, our Cult of Games will get to see our XLBS show on Sunday morning. If you're not already a cultist, you can come and join us. With a 30-day free trial over on tabletop.com, where we witter about hobby, what people have been up to, have a look at stuff that people have been painting. Yeah, we might go a bit old battle techie this week. Spoilers. So yeah, if you want to come and join us for that on Sunday, feel free. And don't forget, if you want to win a copy of Marvel Champions card game, courtesy of the UK GE, then you need to be a subscriber to the channel and pop a comment down below as well. But until next time, take care.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.